Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the shadows where history and nightmare blur. Picture this, you're barefoot, standing on the cold, damp earth of a 14th century European village. There are no streetlights above you, just a pale moon occasionally slipping through thick clouds. The wind moans through the cracks in the thatched roofs, like something out there is quietly sobbing. You're clutching the last bundle of firewood to your chest, hurrying home. Not because you're cold, but because the darkness itself feels heavy, pressing down on your lungs. The forest in the distance looks like a pool of frozen ink, and from within it snap. A branch breaks. A wolf, a poacher, or something else you don't dare think about it. You just want to bolt that creaky wooden door behind you as fast as possible. Oh, and before you wrap yourself up in that blanket, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy the thrill of stories whispered in the dark. And hey, sneak into the comments and tell me, what city are you in, and what time is it right now? Let me know I'm not the only one up late doing historical archaeology in the dark. Alright. Deep breath. Now dim the lights, turn on a little fan for that perfect white noise, and let us slide into tonight's tunnel of shadows together. The mud beneath your feet isn't ordinary soil. It's steeped in centuries of accumulated fear. Nights in medieval Europe weren't romantic stargazing adventures, they were survival challenges. As soon as the sun set, the curfew bell, which literally means cover fire bell, shattered the last remnants of daylight with its harsh toll. Its message: douse the hearth fires, lock your doors, and stay inside. The official reason: fire prevention and theft deterrence. But the real reason: night belonged to the unknown. No streetlights, no police patrols, just boundless, suffocating, impenetrable darkness. Even starlight could be swallowed by thick clouds or dense forests. Your eyes became unreliable allies, shadows writhed in corners, and the wind morphed into whispers. This absolute, physical darkness was the most fertile ground for imagination and panic. Fun fact alert. Did you think curfew was just a suggestion? Think again. In some English towns, carrying a lantern after 9 p.m. fine. Wandering with a torch, double the fine. Carrying a torch and a sword, oh dear, prepare to empty your purse, you were automatically deemed an intended troublemaker. The warden wouldn't listen to excuses about needing the blacksmith to fix your hoe. Nightfall automatically labeled you suspicious. And the forest, it loomed just beyond your village boundary, not as a green lung, but as a vast, mysterious, hostile living entity. Ancient Germanic and Slavic legends told of forest spirits, mountain beings, and shapeshifters dwelling deep within. Christianity arrived but couldn't fully dispel these earth-rooted fears. Instead, it repackaged them with an even eerier veneer: devil's minions, cursed souls now roamed the deep woods. Wolves were a real threat, their howls freezing your blood. But far more terrifying were the stories of things that were like wolves, yet not: the woodsman who vanished, returning days later with hollow eyes and animal fur beneath his nails; the old hermit living on the forest edge, rumored to twist and distort under the full moon. These tales spread like wildfire by dim hearths and in narrow alleyways. Mainstream history time. Why was the night so psychologically crushing? Beyond the physical darkness, medieval life itself was fragile as an eggshell. Famine was a frequent visitor. A single cold snap or heavy rain could destroy crops. Disease: smallpox, leprosy, tuberculosis. Any could scythe through crowds like wheat. Medicine relied on prayer, bloodletting, and foul-tasting herbal brews. Death was too common, too unpredictable. When people couldn't understand or control the suffering in their real world, they naturally turned to the supernatural. Was some malevolent force orchestrating their misfortune? Were the things that moved by night, shunned the sun, and brought death and disease a physical embodiment of evil? Scholars still debate, Were the early legends of vampires and werewolves projections of peasant suffering? Did the Christian Church intentionally or unintentionally exploit folk fears to reinforce the doctrine of the real existence of the devil, thus consolidating its authority? Were they remnants of ancient pagan beliefs, or pure products of survival anxiety? Chicken or egg? Professors have slammed tables in debate for decades with no consensus. But one point is agreed upon: fear needs an outlet. When reality is more terrifying than ghost stories become a perverse form of explanation. You finally grope your way to your door, sliding the heavy wooden bolt shut. Leaning against the door, you hear your heart pounding like a war drum. The last embers in the hearth barely illuminate the hut, casting frantic, dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind seems to have died, but the absolute silence is even more suffocating. You can't shake the feeling that something was running just behind you, stopping the instant you slammed the door. Is it still out there? Is it listening? Will you hear the scrape of claws on wood in the dead of night? Don't worry, you're safe for now. Probably. At least there's enough firewood to last until dawn. In the dark, your hearing becomes unnervingly sharp. In the distance, another stifled, inhuman whimper seems to echo. You pull the rough woolen blanket tighter and huddle closer to the hearth. When will this endless night finally end? Little do you know, a storm of death is soon to sweep the continent, transforming these fears lurking at the edge of darkness into utterly terrifying names. A storm already creeping over the eastern horizon, carrying the stench of decay and the wails of despair. You lean against the rough wooden door, struggling to calm your pounding heart. Outside, dead silence reigns, but a faint, elusive trace of rotten decay seems to permeate the air. This isn't an illusion. Something more terrifying than the night itself is spreading like viscous ink, creeping silently from the east. In 1347, Genoese merchant ships brought death itself as ballast into the port of Sicily. The Black Death had arrived. Imagine this: just weeks ago, Hans the miller next door, strong as an ox, was mocking you for your fear of the dark. Now, through the thin wall, you hear heart-rending coughs tearing from his house. The sound is like a broken bellows wheezing, interspersed with agonized groans. You dare not visit. The next dawn, a crude white cross is hastily scrawled in lime on Hans's doorstep, the mark of death. Days later, the entire street reeks of acrid smoke from burning clothes, herbs, and even bodies. The church's death knell tolls from dawn till dusk, shattering hearts. Death is no longer a vague legend from the forest's edge, it has broken down the door and sits at every table. Brutal facts strike. You thought corpse disposal would be solemn. Think again. At the peak of the plague, people died faster than the living could handle. In some places, death carts patrolled the streets daily like garbage collectors, the drivers hoarsely shouting, "Bring out your dead." Bodies were piled haphazardly, stacked like firewood into hastily dug mass graves, plague pits. No dignified funerals, no priest's last rites, just lime and earth brutally shoveled over them. This hurried, almost sacrilegious treatment of the dead planted seeds of unease in the living. Had they truly found rest? Mainstream history lesson cannot be skipped. The Black Death wiped out between 1/3 and half of Europe's population in just a few years. The symptoms were horrifying: raging fever, swollen lymph nodes turning into black, bursting buboes in armpits and groins, black skin blotches, coughing blood. Death could follow within days. Medicine was powerless. Doctors wore their iconic bird-beak masks, plague doctor masks, stuffed with spices to ward off miasma, resorting to bloodletting, cauterizing buboes with hot irons, feeding patients powdered gold. These treatments often hastened death. Faced with an incomprehensible, unstoppable catastrophe of extinction, people desperately needed an explanation, a target to blame, an entity to fight. Thus, panic began to twist reality. You hear more and more strange happenings. Aunt Mary was buried 3 days ago, and the grave digger swears he heard scratching from inside her coffin. The young Viscount, freshly interred in the family crypt, was seen wandering the corridors of his own castle that very night in his burial shroud, face waxen white. Near the plague pits, a shepherd boy claimed to see a hand reaching out from the earth, its nails caked with mud. Scholars still debate how many of these sightings were hallucinations born of mass hysteria, how many were terrifying misinterpretations of natural corpse decomposition. For instance, gas buildup in the abdomen during decomposition can cause the body to bloat, even shifting coffin lids. Decomposition fluids seeping from the mouth and nose can resemble fresh blood. Skin retracting can expose teeth, forming a ghastly grin. To a populace gripped by terror and lacking scientific knowledge, this looked like the corpse moving, the corpse drinking blood, the corpse smiling. Worse, the plague seemed to favor certain families or villages. Why did the neighbors all die, while old Peter living alone on the hillside remained unharmed? Why was the next village nearly wiped out, while yours lost only a third? The poisonous vine of suspicion began to grow wildly. That old Peter. He was always alone, with a gloomy look, kept a bunch of black cats, and they say his mother had blood at her mouth when buried, actually decomposition fluid. And that widow Anna, bouncing back right after her husband died, did she escape only by feeding on his life force? Fear demands a scapegoat. The solitary, the marginalized, the eccentric, or simply those too lucky to survive, overnight became plague carriers, or something more terrifying, the undead. They were seen as the source of the plague, crawling from graves at night to blow the breath of death upon the living. You huddle by your hearth, listening as the final cries from Hans's house next door fade into silence. The air is thick with the pungent smell of burning wormwood and rosemary, believed to ward off miasma or evil spirits, but the deeper stench of decay stubbornly seeps through. Your mind involuntarily conjures the image of Hans being buried, the hastily nailed, thin wooden coffin, shoved unevenly into the pit. You shudder. What if he came back? What if he didn't die of plague, but was killed by something? What if he became that thing, and who would it come for first? Darkness was no longer just the absence of light. It was now imbued with tangible terror, thick with the breath of decay and silent stares. People began to spontaneously deal with suspicious corpses, not for medical reasons, but for exorcism. Stakes, decapitation, burning, weighing down bodies with stones. These brutal preventative measures spread with the panic, attempts to physically kill the evil perceived to still be alive in the grave. A new, more concrete figure of terror was slowly taking shape in the rotting earth and desperate imaginings. It craved blood, it feared sunlight and holy symbols, it moved by night. Do you smell it? That isn't just the stench of plague, it's the first twisted bloom of the vampire legend sprouting from the carrion, and deep in the distant Carpathian mountains, the man who would give this terrifying figure its name and eternal glory, Vlad the Impaler, awaited his time to step onto the stage. While legends of the Impaler Prince brew in the east, another kind of howl, more primal, more feral, tears through the silent night sky deep within the northwestern forests. You've barely caught your breath from the stench of plague death, and now a new fear presses in from the very edge of your village, the dark, boundless woods. This isn't about rotting corpses, but about transformation, about how a man can utterly become a beast. Welcome to the terrifying domain of the werewolf. Imagine yourself, the forester's son, raised on warnings, never enter the deep woods after sunset. But tonight is different. Toby, your family's watchdog, frantically chased a rabbit into the forest at dusk and never returned. Your father lies deathly ill in bed, your mother looks at you with tear-filled eyes. You are the only one left who can move. You are forced to grab the rusty axe, hoist a torch, and step into the suffocating darkness. The torchlight seems pitifully weak among the towering ancient trees, as if the surrounding ink could swallow it at any moment. The layer of humus underfoot is thick and soft, each step feels like stepping on the spine of some unknown creature. The wind wails through the treetops. Suddenly, a long, piercing, bone-chilling wolf howl echoes from a nearby ridge. Then a second, a third. As if answering each other. Every hair on your body stands on end, your palm, gripping the axe handle, is slick with sweat. This isn't distant background noise. They are close. And, they are moving. Cold knowledge that chills your spine. You thought wolves only took stray lambs. Medieval European wolf packs were ruthless predators that didn't spare humans. Especially during harsh winters or famines, records abound of starving packs attacking villages and snatching children. Remote areas of France even had the term Année du loup, year of the wolf, specifically denoting years of severe wolf predation causing massive human and livestock casualties. Wolves were tangible, touchable messengers of death. Mainstream history time, the wolf threat was physical, but another kind of wolf threat burrowed into the human psyche: rabies. This deadly virus, spread by animals especially dogs and wolves, was medieval proof of demonic possession. Picture seeing your neighbor, Jacob the blacksmith. Days ago he was bitten by a red-eyed, foaming stray dog. At first, just fever, fear of water, the classic rabies symptom, hydrophobia. Then, he becomes violently aggressive, hallucinates, emits inhuman shrieks, grows hypersensitive to light and sound, and even tries to bite people. Finally, he might die in convulsions and agony. To people lacking modern medical knowledge, this wasn't illness. This was the wolf's curse taking hold, the process of a man's soul being forcibly usurped by a beast. Jacob's contorted face, beast-like howls, and aggression in death perfectly matched the terrifying imagination of man turning wolf. Scholars still debate, beyond rabies, could other rare neurological or psychiatric disorders like certain epileptic seizures, severe schizophrenia have been mistaken for the transformation, or was it mass hysteria erupting under specific high-pressure environments like war, famine? When an entire village believes in werewolves, isn't a person acting strangely far more likely to be identified as one, but there's another, more heartbreaking kind of evidence, etched directly onto the human body: rare genetic disorders. Think of Pierre, the boy in your village, shunned and feared. He was different from birth, his face, arms covered in thick, coarse hair, hypertrichosis, werewolf syndrome. His teeth protruded slightly, and his eyes, shadowed by years of isolation, seemed sullen and evasive. Pierre did nothing wrong. Merely because of his congenital appearance, he was seen as a half-man, half-wolf monster. On full moons, busybodies would spy outside his hovel, hoping to catch his transformation. Whispers spread, his mother was cursed by a forest wolf spirit while pregnant, or his father was a wolf. Physical discrimination combined with fear of the unknown was enough to nail an innocent person to the pillar of inhuman shame. Your torch-bearing hand trembles. The howls seem closer, even the sound of paws snapping twigs. You recall the village's ways to spot a werewolf: eyebrows joined, could be hypertrichosis or just thick hair. Middle finger unusually long, normal anatomical variation. Mouth open, tongue lolling while sleeping, maybe just snoring. Body doesn't decompose after death, specific soil conditions or embalming. These utterly unscientific traits became irrefutable proof in the grip of panic. More terrifyingly, the fervor of the witch hunts soon spread to werewolves. Cold knowledge, brutal truth. You thought only witches were burned. The 16th to 17th centuries saw numerous werewolf trials across Europe, especially France, Germany, Switzerland. The most infamous, like the 1589 case of Peter Stump in Bedburg, Germany. Under torture, he confessed to signing a pact with the devil for a magic wolfskin belt allowing him to transform. He admitted to killing over a dozen people, including children, over 25 years. Despite absurdly flimsy evidence, the belt was never found. He and his accomplice's daughter and mistress were executed with extreme cruelty, broken on the wheel, flayed, and burned. His head was displayed on a stake as a warning. Such trials, often involving torture, produced coerced confessions that in turn proved the existence of werewolves, creating a terrifying vicious cycle. You finally find Toby, trembling and wounded, under a thorn bush. You scoop him up and run for your life. The howls chase you, seeming right at your heels. You burst back to the village edge, slam the fence gate shut, and lean against it, gasping. In the torchlight, a few pairs of ghostly green eyes seem to flash at the forest's edge. Wolves or something else. You look down at Toby in your arms, whimpering as he licks your hand. Suddenly, you think of Pierre, and the same look of fear and confusion in his eyes. The real beasts are in the forest, but the beasts born from prejudice and fear within the human heart can sometimes be far crueler, far more pervasive. The night is long. Moonlight breaks through the clouds, casting a cold glow on the silent village. A new kind of panic, targeting the living, is fermenting. When people grow dissatisfied with digging up vampires from graves and instead turn their suspicious gaze towards their neighbors, even their kin, an even more absurd and cruel hunt, drenched in blood, is about to begin. You clutch the injured Toby, heart still pounding, back in your hut. The meager warmth from the hearth does little to dispel the chill deep within. The shadows of the forest and the stench of plague seem to linger just beyond the door. But now, far to the east, two names are about to rise from the bloody mire of history, wrapped layer upon layer in fear and legend, destined to become the most chilling cornerstones of vampire lore. Vlad III and Elizabeth Bathory. Are you ready to meet these two legends? Vlad the Impaler. Imagine you are an envoy sent by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire to Wallachia, southern Romania. The year is 1462. Your mission is to collect overdue tribute from the defiant voivode, Vlad Tepes the Impaler. Riding with the arrogant pomp of imperial power through the gloomy passes of Transylvania, the sight along the road makes your stomach churn. Thousands upon thousands of sharpened stakes, like a ghastly forest, impaling tens of thousands of corpses, Ottoman prisoners, rebellious nobles, thieves, even peasants who failed to pay taxes. Bodies rot and bloat in the wind, ravens circling and pecking. The air is thick, suffocating. This is Vlad's welcome, a silent, deafening warning. Defy him, and the price is becoming part of his forest. You feign composure, but sweat soaks the reins in your palm. Cold knowledge twist. You thought Vlad was a shadowy monster hiding in a castle. Wrong. He was the ruler of Wallachia, ascending to the throne 3 times. His cruelty, especially impaling, was largely a tool to terrorize internal and external enemies and maintain order. His definition of order, of course. Such extreme violence wasn't uncommon in the Balkans then. He even minted coins bearing a dragon symbol. Dracul. The origin of the name Dracula. Dracul meaning dragon or devil, a meaning son of, hence son of the dragon devil. Mainstream history time. Vlad was born into turbulent times. Wallachia was a buffer state squeezed between the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary. As a youth, Vlad was sent as a hostage to the Ottoman court by his father, enduring humiliation that likely shaped his cold, paranoid nature. As ruler, he governed with an iron fist internally, crushing corrupt nobles. Impalement awaited and reviving the economy. Externally, he fiercely resisted the mighty Ottoman invasions. In the famous 1462 night attack, he led a small elite force, using intimate knowledge of the terrain and terror tactics including sowing chaos in the Ottoman camp and leaving fields of impaled corpses, to inflict heavy losses on Sultan Mehmed II's army, forcing its retreat. To some Romanians, he remains a national hero who defended the homeland against overwhelming odds. Scholars still debate, was Vlad's reign of terror driven by his personality, or was it a desperate survival strategy for a weak state surrounded by powerful enemies? Did his brutal methods effectively deter enemies and maintain internal stability? How much of the horrific stories about his bloodlust, like dining among captives, dipping bread in blood, were deliberate smear campaigns by political enemies? Hungarians, German merchants, Ottomans. The truth is long buried in historical gore. Elizabeth Bathory. Shift your gaze decades later to the Kingdom of Hungary, present-day Slovakia. Imagine you are a young maid sent to serve Countess Elizabeth Bathory at Aigtis Castle. The castle is grand but oppressive, its thick stone walls sealing it off from the world. The Countess is beautiful, fabulously wealthy, and wields immense power, but an unsettling silence hangs over the castle, laced with a faint metallic tang of rust. You soon notice the maidservants change too frequently. The older ones avoid your gaze, tight-lipped. Tasked with massaging the Countess's body daily with special oils, you note her obsessive fixation on her own pale skin. One late night, passing a remote tower, you hear muffled, chilling cries of girls, punctuated by sickening thuds. Terrified, you creep back to the servants' quarters, sleepless until dawn. Cold knowledge chiller, Lady Bathory wasn't a fictional Gothic queen. She was one of Europe's wealthiest women, born into the powerful Bathory family and married into the equally influential Nádasdy family. Her husband, a famous anti-Ottoman commander, was often away at war. The castle was her personal kingdom. The most infamous legend claims she bathed in the blood of virgins to preserve her youth. But here's the key: while surviving historical records, primarily her 1,610 trial transcripts, are filled with horrific testimonies from servants and accomplices detailing torture, bloodletting to death, there is no direct evidence she actually bathed in blood. This seems a later, Gothic embellishment. Mainstream history cannot be skipped. In 1610, led by her cousin, Hungarian Palatine György III, Bathory was arrested. An investigation which allegedly discovered numerous bodies and abused girls within the castle and subsequent trial based heavily on servant testimonies, many obtained under torture, accused her of torturing and killing hundreds of girls, a number likely greatly exaggerated. Due to her high rank, she was spared execution. Instead, she was walled alive in a small room within Aigtis Castle, windows and doors bricked up, only a small slit left for food. She died in this stone tomb 4 years later. Scholars still debate, was the Bathory case a carefully orchestrated political conspiracy? Did her vast wealth and lands provide the perfect pretext for King Matthias II and her own covetous relatives to seize them? How much of the sensational charges were actual crimes? How much were products of torture, and how much were amplified by political enemies exploiting popular fears of witches and blood-drinking noblewomen? Was she simply a powerful noblewoman, left unsupervised for long periods, whose cruelty was magnified and demonized by the era's anxieties? The legacy: as the envoy, you finally bow your head before Vlad's forest of impaled corpses. Tribute: you dare not mention it now. As the maid, you are told one morning the Countess mercifully releases you home. You flee the stone fortress and its cloying, bloody sweetness without looking back. Vlad III died fighting the Ottomans in 1476, some say assassinated, his head sent to Constantinople for display. Elizabeth Bathory perished alone in darkness. Their bodies vanished, but their names and the terrifying tale's truth mixed with fiction spread on the winds sweeping the Eastern European plains and the shadows of the Carpathians. These stories fermented and mutated, blending fears of aristocratic abuse of power, anxieties about deadly female allure, the morbid craving for immortality, and humanity's deep-seated fascination with blood. Here, history and legend performed a crucial transfusion. When later writers scoured archives and folklore for material, Vlad's forests of stakes and Bathory's blood-stained castle provided ready-made, visceral images of terror and archetypes: a cold, powerful, fear-ruling male aristocrat, a beautiful, cruel, youth-obsessed female aristocrat, the nascent form of the vampire myth's nobles of the night taking shape. The wind blows from Transylvania, carrying the scent of iron and ancient stone. These bloody annals wait, ready to be ignited by the pen of an Irish playwright and a London clerk, destined to flare into a global conflagration of the night. Vlad's bloody forests and Bathory's grim castle whisper on the wind, but a different kind of panic, more pervasive, more fanatical, was sweeping across the continent like plague itself. You've just set down the horrifying accounts of the Eastern Impaler Prince, only to turn and find ominous flames licking at your own doorstep, not a warming bonfire, but a pyre for burning the other. The witch hunts, a wave of collective madness spanning nearly 3 centuries, was quietly turning its focus to new terrors of the night: werewolves and vampires. Imagine yourself as an ordinary peasant woman in a 16th century German village. Tonight, the air is thick with dread. In the village square, a pyre is built high. The smell of pine pitch and something charred hangs heavy. Your neighbor, old Marta, who lived alone near the woods and knew herbs to ease toothaches, is stripped to her shift and bound to the stake. Her white hair is wild, her clouded eyes wide with terror, her cracked lips moving soundlessly. A zealous priest shouts her crimes in Latin, signing a pact with the devil, cursing a neighbor's cow dry with witchcraft, transforming into a wolf under the full moon to attack sheep. The crowd watches with complex gazes: fear, anger, numb acceptance. You clutch your apron, remembering how Marta secretly gave you herbs that cured your child's fever. But do you dare speak now? Cold knowledge that shocks. The core textbook of the witch hunts, the infamous Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, was written in 1486 by the Dominican friar Heinrich Kramer. This toxic tome, brimming with misogyny, paranoia, and torture guides, spread like a virus. It meticulously instructed on identifying, trying, and executing witches, specifically stating, witches could transform into wolves or other animals including cats. This provided the theoretical basis for folding werewolf accusations into the witch-hunting machinery. Mainstream history time, the witch hunts were the explosive culmination of multiple social crises: the religious extremism and conflict sparked by the Reformation and Counter-Reformation, the famine caused by crop failures during the Little Ice Age, the terror of recurring plague deaths, the weak central authority leading to chaotic local justice. When suffering defied explanation, people desperately needed a visible culprit, the other, those believed to be in league with the devil, bringing calamity. Women, especially the elderly, solitary, herbal knowledgeable, or socially nonconforming, bore the brunt, but men weren't spared, particularly when werewolf accusations surfaced. Scholars still debate what was the true scale of the witch hunts. The often cited figure is roughly 40,000 to 60,000 executed, approximate 75%–80% women, but this is likely the tip of the iceberg. Countless more died under torture or disease in prisons, countless more lived under the shadow of accusation. Can this be seen as institutionalized gender and class violence targeting specific groups? Women, the marginalized. The witch-hunting net soon ensnared werewolves and vampires. The logic was brutally simple: the devil is the source of all evil. Witches are the devil's servants. Transforming into a wolf, werewolf, or rising from the grave to consume life, vampire, are powers only the devil can grant. Therefore, a werewolf vampire must be a witch warlock, or the devil incarnate. Thus, trials targeting these creatures of the night were cloaked in the sanctity of exorcism, yet employed the same cruel methods. Cold knowledge absurdity, how to scientifically identify a werewolf vampire. The methods were rigorous to the point of absurdity. Abnormal corpse, if the body was slow to stiffen, ruddy complexioned actually gases and color from decomposition, blood at the mouth nose decomposition fluids, nails hair seeming to grow illusion from skin retraction ironclad proof. A vampire. Animal behavior, if the deceased's livestock acted strangely, e.g. cows refusing to be milked, or animals especially black cats, bats, wolves frequented the grave, proof the restless master was haunting. Sightings of activity, claims of seeing the dead return, even vague shadows or nightmares, were enough for condemnation. The cures, i.e. destruction methods, were a horrifying catalogue of cruelty. For vampires, stake through the heart to stop activity, decapitation, complete separation, burning, purification, stuffing the mouth with garlic or stones to stop blood sucking, binding the corpse with thorns to trap the soul. For werewolves, accused living individuals were tortured for confession and usually burned to purify the soul. The already deceased were exhumed for similar execution rituals. Mainstream history cannot forget. The early 18th century saw massive vampire panics erupt in Eastern Europe, especially Serbia, Hungary, Poland, astonishing in scale and level of official involvement. Famous cases include Petar Blagojevic in Serbia 1725 and Arnold Bowell 1730-132. Villagers reported Petar returning after death to strangle people. Arnold claimed he'd been bitten by a vampire in life and became one after death, attacking villagers. Local officials, including army surgeons, were called in, personally overseeing exhumations, documenting the fresh horrors, undecomposed bodies, blood at mouth nose, and ordering staking, decapitation, and burning. Official reports circulated, shocking Europe and even prompting discussion and ridicule from Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire. You stand at the edge of the square, watching the flames consume Marta's frail body. Her screams ceased long ago. The thick smoke stings your eyes, making them water. You lower your head, unable to meet the gazes of your neighbors. Yesterday they labored beside you in the fields. Today they cheer the execution based on a baseless werewolf accusation. A cold deeper than any winter night seeps into your bones. This hunt for the enemy within, this persecution, eats away at the trust binding the community like a plague. Anyone, even you, could be branded a creature of the night and pushed towards that roaring pyre over a rumor, an argument, or simply looking wrong. The flames leap in the square, casting flickering, distorted shadows on the faces of the onlookers. Fanaticism spreads like a contagion. The priest proclaims this God's victory, but the air holds only the stench of char and fear. Once the seed of suspicion is sown, it grows wildly in the dark, tangling around everyone's ankles. And you don't yet know that within this chaos, seemingly driven by faith and terror, a faint but tenacious light of reason struggles to pierce the smoke. A few daring souls are preparing to see for themselves, with their own eyes and blades, the truth of the horrors rumored to stir within the graves. The embers of the pyre burning old Marta in the square are still warm, the acrid smoke still burning your throat. But a new, more pragmatic current is rising with the faint dawn of the Age of Enlightenment. While fear drives villagers with pitchforks to the graveyards, figures in wigs wielding magnifying glasses and scalpels, sometimes accompanied by soldiers, are also appearing at the exhumation sites. They aren't there for exorcisms, they are there for autopsies. In the 18th century, the spirit of reason began its tentative challenge to the supernatural, and the battlefield lay within those stinking graves. Imagine yourself as an assistant to an Austrian military surgeon sent to the Serbian village of Medvedija in 1732 to investigate reports of vampire attacks. Hooves clatter on muddy roads, the air crackles with unease. The village feels lifeless, windows shuttered. Hail local officials, report to your superior, Surgeon Johannes Flickinger. Since the soldier Arnold Bowell died in a fall months ago, over a dozen people have died mysteriously, each claiming Bowell strangled them before death. The villagers are convinced Bowell became a vampire. Fear spreads like plague, fields lie fallow, everyone is terrified. Dr. Flickinger adjusts his spectacles and decides to do something unprecedented: systematically exhume and examine all suspicious corpses under official supervision. Cold Knowledge Hardcore Edition. You thought doctors then only looked at the surface. Flickinger's team's report, Visum et Repertum, seen and discovered, 1732, is an early masterpiece of forensic vampirism. They meticulously documented the exhumations. Bowell's corpse. The corpse was preserved. The skin fresh and moist. Nails and hair seemed newly grown. Fresh blood flowed from the mouth. The internal organs were in a normal state. Other recent corpses similarly showed freshness, lack of decay, and bloody discharge from nose-mouth, all abnormal. Conclusion: lacking modern microbiology and knowledge of decomposition, the doctors could only attribute these phenomena to vampire activity based on observation and sanctioned the villagers' staking and burning. This official report, widely circulated, ironically provided scientific certification for vampires. Mainstream history lesson: Flickinger wasn't alone. Around the same time, 1725, another Austrian official, Procopius, handled the Petr Blagojevic case and submitted a similar report. These events reached the Habsburg court in Vienna. Empress Maria Theresa, influenced by Enlightenment ideals, was deeply skeptical of such superstition. In 1746, she dispatched her personal physician, Gerard van Swieten, to Moravia, modern Czech Republic, to investigate another major vampire panic. Swieten's report was the turning point. This scientifically trained physician reached radically different conclusions: preservation and freshness, attributed to soil conditions cold, dry, mineral-rich, coffin ceiling, and the deceased's physique, e.g. obesity, slows decay, producing more fresh fluid. Bloody discharge, natural seepage of decomposition gases and fluids. Nail hair growth, illusion caused by skin retraction as the body dehydrated, exposing more nail and hair root. Strangulations, often misdiagnosed plague deaths, e.g. pneumonic plague causing suffocation or panic-induced associations fueled by mass hysteria. Swieten's masterstroke: he persuaded the Empress to issue a decree in 1755-56. It banned all unauthorized exhumations and corpse desecration. Violators faced severe punishment. This marked the state beginning to use rational administrative power to suppress the mob violence of vampire panics. Scholars still debate: did early investigators like Flickinger truly believe in vampires, or were they constrained by local pressure or scientific limitations, forced to use the prevailing supernatural framework? Was Swieten's success more due to his imperial authority than universal scientific acceptance of his explanations? After all, the detailed biochemistry of decomposition wasn't fully understood until the mid to late 19th century. As the surgeon's assistant, you fight back nausea, recording the fresh features of Bowell's corpse under Flickinger's direction. The stench of decay mingled with earth fills your nostrils. You watch the doctor calmly slice open the chest cavity with his scalpel, examining the organs. His expression is serious, but his eyes hold not the villagers' blind terror, but a cold, clinical curiosity. When the stake is driven forcefully into Bowell's chest, splattering dark, viscous fluid, a mix of decomposition fluid and blood, the villagers cheer in relief. You feel only absurdity and profound sorrow. These brutally treated corpses were likely ordinary soldiers, farmers, or housewives in life. In death, the natural process of decay, twisted by fear, transformed them into man-eating monsters. Cold knowledge bittersweet ironic, to quell panic, the rationalists of the time even devised scientific vampire prevention methods. Improved coffins, added air holes to vent decomposition gases, preventing bloating, internal bells or flags purely psychological triggered if the corpse moved. Safe burials, burying the corpse face down. Vampires supposedly dig downwards, burying themselves deeper, scattering mustard or poppy seeds beside the body. Legend claims vampires have a compulsion to count every seed before acting, delaying them until dawn. You close your notebook and follow Dr. Flickering away from the ravaged graveyard. Behind you, thick smoke rises from the villagers' burning pyres. The doctor's conclusions seem to have calmed them, but doubt gnaws at you. Isn't condemning a corpse as a vampire and destroying it based solely on abnormal state just another form of superstition? Where lies the root of the true plague, whether the deadly contagion itself or the madness of mass panic? The light of reason had begun to pierce the fog of ignorance, but the road ahead was long. While official reports and imperial decrees circulated on desks, in another realm, the salons of literature and art, those terrifying images dismissed by medical reports as decomposition and hysteria were being quietly gathered by people of soaring imagination. They would take quill and ink, bestowing upon these dark legends a new, chilling, and elegant allure. Vampires and werewolves were about to shed their grimy shrouds for velvet coats, stepping onto a far grander, and far deadlier, stage. The coroner's scalpel still bears grave dirt, the Empress's decree ink barely dry, yet the aura of dread and death hasn't vanished. It has merely been discreetly ushered by men wielding quills into smoke-filled salons and libraries stacked with ancient tomes. The rational light of the 18th century sought to banish the darkness, but the romantics of the 19th found that light too harsh, too dull. They turned to embrace the shadows, distilling the grisly terrors from the soil into a potent literary wine with ornate prose and chilling plots. Vampires and werewolves were about to achieve immortality in the halls of literature. Imagine yourself a hapless guest seeking shelter from the rain in the summer of 1816 at the Villa Diodati on the shores of Lake Geneva, Switzerland. Outside, an abnormally cold, wet spell, the tail end of the Little Ice Age, shrouds the lake region in gloom. Wind and rain lash the windows like countless scrabbling hands. The fire in the hearth flickers uncertainly. Inside, a group of brilliant and intensely self-absorbed young people are bored. The poet Lord Byron, perpetually brooding and captivating, his private physician, John Polidori, somewhat stiffly in attendance, and the passionate young Percy Shelley with his future wife, Mary Godwin, then still another man's wife. To combat the suffocatingly dreadful weather, Byron proposes a challenge: each write the most terrifying ghost story. Cold knowledge and gossip corner. You thought Frankenstein was the only enduring result of this ghost story contest? Think again. Another monstrously influential creature was conceived here, the archetype of the modern aristocratic vampire. Byron sketched a fragment about a vampire later abandoned, but his admirer and physician, Polidori, seized the inspiration. In 1819, he published The Vampire. Its protagonist, Lord Ruthven, pale, handsome, elegant, wealthy, exuding lethal charm, delighting in manipulating and draining the life from others, especially women. Behold! Vlad III's blood-stained scepter, polished to a high sheen by Polidori and dressed in the finest London fashion. Mainstream history lesson: Polidori's The Vampire was pivotal. From village to salon, transplanted the vampire from muddy Eastern European graves and panicked villages directly into the ballrooms and boudoirs of the Western European elite. From corpse to aristocrat, a complete image overhaul. No longer a bloated, rotting revenant, but a noble of the night, refined, eloquent, and lethally alluring. Charm as weapon, emphasized psychic manipulation and seduction over brute physical violence. Fangs weren't even necessary. The contagion concept, those marked by Lord Ruthven would eventually die and become vampires themselves. The novel was a sensation, wildly adapted for the stage, and swept across Europe. The vampire was cemented as a literary archetype and pop culture icon. But the true coronation of the vampire king waited over half a century. Imagine walking into a London bookstore in 1897. A new novel titled Dracula catches your eye. Its author, Bram Stoker, an obscure Irish theatre manager. You open the pages and are immediately gripped by an unprecedented chill. The sinister castle Dracula in Transylvania, the mysterious, terrifying count, the cursed ship Demeter laden with coffins and earth crossing the sea, the pure maiden Lucy Westenra slowly corrupted, Professor Van Helsing leading the fight against the undead count. Cold knowledge, the unsung hero. Stoker didn't conjure this from thin air. He was a research fanatic, delving into travel guides, especially on Transylvania's then part of Austria-Hungary geography, folklore, and superstitions, though he never visited. Historical accounts, the brutal reign of Vlad III Vlad the Impaler. Early vampire lore, including Van Swiaten's report, Eastern European folklore, Polidori's novel, etc. Contemporary tech ideas, blood transfusions. Van Helsing gives Lucy blood, early psychoanalysis, hypnotic suggestion, the phonograph used to record diaries, lending the tale a modern veneer. He meticulously assembled, polished, and elevated these disparate elements, creating literature's most famous undead being Count Dracula. Stoker's magic formula, the synthesizer, combined aristocratic allure Polidori, historical precedent Vlad III, Eastern European mystique, and folkloric weaknesses sunlight, sacred objects, stakes, native soil. Gothic atmosphere master, vividly painted castle Dracula, desolate graveyards, and fog-choked London streets for maximum oppressive terror. Victorian anxieties, deeply embedded contemporary fears, sexual anxiety, Dracula's corruption of women and sexual undertones. Lucy's transformation from angel to voluptuous bluffer lady tapped into strict Victorian sexual mores. Foreign threat, ancient evil from the backward, savage East invading the civilized heart of the British Empire, London. Science versus faith, Van Helsing embodies the conflict, using both science transfusions, phonograph, and superstition holy water, crucifixes. Epistolary narrative, told through diaries, letters, telegrams, and newspaper clippings, enhancing realism and suspense. Scholars still debate, did Stoker overly romanticize the historical tyrant Vlad III? Does his portrayal of Transylvania rely on Orientalist stereotypes, mysterious, backward, irrational to serve a Western sense of superiority? Are the sexual metaphors, especially female transformation, intentional, or later scholarly overinterpretation? Don't forget the werewolf. While the vampire underwent its elegant makeover, the werewolf myth also evolved in literature. Initially, it featured mainly in folktales or as background for witch hunts like Old Marta. But in 1846, French writer Pierre-Alexis Ponson du Terrail serialized Le Loup-garou, the Werewolf of Paris, bringing the creature into an urban setting. More crucially, in 1847, German scholar and folklorist Sabine Baring-Gould published the Book of Werewolves, attempting a systematic collection, organization, and classification of global shape-shifting lore including werewolves. This provided academic backing and a richer story reservoir, fueling later writers' imaginations. You close Dracula, your back damp with cold sweat. The London night outside suddenly seems perilous, every shadow might conceal that count with the high cheekbones, aquiline nose, and piercing eyes. Stoker's creation was too potent, too convincing. He was no longer a vague terror from an Eastern European backwater, but the ultimate symbol of evil, capable of crossing oceans, invading the modern metropolis, and challenging both science and faith. Literature had bestowed upon these creatures of the night an unparalleled vitality. Yet Count Dracula's ambition stretched far beyond the printed page. His greedy gaze was fixed on the 20th century's most magical new medium, the vast silver screen capable of transforming light and shadow into tangible dreams. When the projector's beam ignited, the Count's pale visage would loom large before countless viewers, his whispers echoing through cinemas, making the world tremble. Vampires and werewolves were about to enter their Hollywood golden age. You close the yellowed pages of Dracula, the wail of the Transylvanian wind still seeming to echo in your ears. But the Count within its pages was no longer content with immortality confined to ink and paper. His gaze pierced the book's spine, crossing the Atlantic to a new world, weaving dreams from light and shadow Hollywood. In the early 20th century, the flickering silver screens of the silent era began to glow. Vampires and werewolves were about to shed their literary finery and don a more visceral, more terrifying, yet more captivating guise of light and shadow, becoming immortal icons of global popular culture. Imagine yourself as a New Yorker in February 1931, clutching a ticket, squeezing into a cinema reeking of popcorn and cheap perfume. The lights dim, the projector whirs, a beam pierces the darkness. On screen, the doors of a sinister castle slowly creak open. A gaunt, pale figure with eyes like deep, icy pools descends the stairs. Clad in a high-collared cape, candlelight casts stark shadows across his high cheekbones and sharp aquiline nose. When he speaks, his heavily accented English is low and magnetic. I am Dracula. I bid you welcome. The theater erupts in muffled gasps and sharp intakes of breath. Bela Lugosi's Count Dracula is born. Behind the scenes legend, Lugosi himself was Hungarian, sharing an intrinsic link with Dracula's homeland. He first triumphed playing the Count on Broadway in the stage play Dracula. When Universal Pictures decided to adapt it for film, Lugosi fought tooth and nail for the role. The studio initially favored bigger star Lon Chaney. He immersed himself, crafting the iconic, slow, unnervingly elegant movements and hypnotic gaze. He imbued Dracula with a cold, imperious, and exotically deadly allure, single-handedly establishing the aesthetic template for all future screen vampires. He was even buried wearing his signature Dracula cape. Mainstream history focus: Universal's 1931 Dracula was a cinematic milestone. Genre pioneer, alongside Frankenstein. Also Universal, released the same year, it launched Hollywood's golden age of horror and established the foundation for the Universal Monsters universe. Image definer: the high-collared black cape hiding fangs, pale skin, piercing stare, aristocratic bearing, hypnotic power, fatal vulnerability to sunlight. Elements from Stoker's novel were visualized, amplified, and cemented as the globally recognized standard vampire look. The power of sound: as an early sound film, Lugosi's unique, slow, rhythmic delivery became a weapon of terror itself. Lugosi's Dracula was the epitome of elegance, but the vampire clan soon welcomed a prince of a very different style. In 1958, Britain's Hammer Film Productions unleashed horror of Dracula US, Dracula. Imagine sitting in a British cinema as the screen explodes with lurid color crimson carpets, deep blue nights, deathly white skin, spurting gore. Christopher Lee's Count Dracula emerges, taller, more powerfully built, younger, his eyes burning with raw animal lust and aggression. When he bares his fangs, it's no subtle hint, it's accompanied by a snarl, crimson blood dripping from his lips. Blood Revolution: Hammer was notorious for its bold for the time use of color and gore, pushing censorship boundaries. Lee's Dracula was less a suitor, more a dominant, sensual, primal predator. He exuded wild terror, lacking Lugosi's restraint. Possessing a magnificent bass voice, Lee was directed to speak minimally. Producers believed silence was scarier, conveying menace through sheer physical presence and piercing eyes. He played Dracula or record 10 times. The Werewolf's turn, not to be outdone. Universal released Werewolf of London in the same year as Lugosi's Dracula 1935, but it fizzled. The true cinematic explosion for the Werewolf arrived with the groundbreaking The Wolf Man in 1941. Picture yourself in the theater, watching the kind-hearted, melancholic Larry Talbot played by Lon Chaney Jr. return to his Welsh village. One fateful night, he encounters a strange beast in the moonlit moors, and is bitten. Soon, the terrible curse takes hold. With each full moon, he transforms into a shaggy, bloodthirsty werewolf. Effects milestone, The Wolf Man featured cinema's most iconic though now primitive-looking transformation sequence. Makeup maestro Jack Pierce spent hours applying yak hair, crafting rubber prosthetics enhancing brow, snout, and fitting fangs onto Chaney Jr. The change used dissolves and reverse photography to show hair growing horrifyingly from beneath the skin. Crucially, the Wolf Man established core rules still used today: full moon trigger, moonlight is the key catalyst. Silver kills, silver bullets, daggers is the only weakness. The curse spreads, bites or scratches transmit the affliction. Inner torment, Larry Talbot's tragic awareness of his curse, his agonizing struggle between humanity and bestiality, evoked deep audience sympathy. Chaney Jr.'s powerful performance perfectly captured this anguish. Scholars still debate, did Hollywood, especially Universal and Hammer, enrich the vampire-werewolf myths, or oversimplify and stereotype them? Were repeated emphases on vampire weaknesses, garlic, holy water, crosses, coffins now common knowledge? A reduction of the more varied and less absolute folklore? Did rigid rules like the werewolf's full moon trigger and silver kill diminish the original mystique and regional diversity of the legends? Did these films, while spreading horror culture, also reinforce stereotypes about the exotic East, Dracula's home, and savagery? The werewolf you emerge from the theater. The 1931 New York wind bites, yet Dracula's icy stare seems to cling to the back of your neck. Under the 1941 moonlight, you can almost hear Larry Talbot's agonized howl before the change. Hollywood's dream factories, using celluloid and stars, polished these ancient monsters born of fear into glittering icons of pop culture. They were no longer the vague nightmares of medieval peasants, but monster stars with form or lack thereof, rules, weaknesses, and even fans. Universal monsters crossed over. Frankenstein meets the Wolf Man, son of Dracula, sparking the earliest monster universe craze. The screams and special effects on screen were potent, yet the blurred line between legend and reality never vanished. Walking home alone at midnight, your shadow stretching long under the streetlights, a thought might surface unbidden: are these stories really just stories in the cracks of the brightly lit modern urban jungle? Might unseen creatures of the night still lurk? Hollywood illuminated the monsters, and in doing so, inadvertently provided richer fodder for real-world sightings and imaginings. As the screen's glow fades, new urban legends begin to stir in the dark corners untouched by neon. Hollywood's spotlight granted Dracula and the Wolf Man immortality on the silver screen. But stepping out of the cinema into the fluorescent glare of the real world, a more rational, yet subtly chilling question surfaces: do the symptoms blamed on the supernatural light aversion, bloodlust, transformation, rage have a scientific reflection in our reality? 20th and 21st century medicine, like a modern Van Helsing wielding scalpels and microscopes, began to scrutinize the ancient legends, seeking the real soil where these tales took root in disease and mutation. Imagine yourself as a medical intern pulling an all-nighter in the library, a heavy dermatology atlas open before you. On the yellowed pages, a photograph makes you catch your breath, a gaunt man, lips atrophied, exposing unusually sharp, reddish teeth, skin covered in horrifying blisters and scars, fingers deformed. The caption reads, Porphyria cutanea tarda PCT. You turn to the accompanying text, patients experience severe photosensitivity, sunlight exposure causes skin burns, blisters, ulcers, scarring. May be accompanied by anemia, abdominal pain, neuropsychiatric symptoms. Urine may appear dark red or purple under certain conditions historically mistaken for bloody urine. A word strikes you like lightning, vampire. Medical Archive. Porphyria is a group of rare inherited or acquired metabolic disorders caused by defects in enzymes involved in heme synthesis. This leads to abnormal accumulation of porphyrins, light-sensitive compounds in the body. Several subtypes like acute intermittent porphyria, IPE, and congenital erythropoietic porphyria, SEP, exhibit symptoms eerily aligned with vampire lore: extreme photosensitivity. Porphyrins are photosensitizers. UV light exposure causes severe pain, blistering, necrosis, and disfigurement. Patients are forced into a nocturnal existence. Facial alterations. Chronic skin damage can cause lips and gums to recede, exposing more teeth, creating a fanged appearance. Noses, ears, and fingers may become deformed or lost due to repeated damage. SEP patients' teeth may stain reddish-brown blood teeth from porphyrin deposits. Blood craving. A widespread but medically disputed theory suggests severe porphyria patients, suffering anemia or metabolic distress, might instinctively seek blood rich in heme precursors for relief. While no reliable cases support this, it's often cited in legendary explanations. Garlic repellent. Chemicals in garlic might interfere with the already fragile heme synthesis in porphyria patients, worsening abdominal pain or neuropsychiatric symptoms, anxiety, hallucinations, causing aversion. Mainstream medicine. Time. In 1985, biochemist David Dolphin first systematically proposed porphyria as a possible medical route for vampire legends, sparking huge interest and debate. However, key points are: porphyria is extremely rare, SEP affects only hundreds globally, and symptom severity varies greatly. There is no evidence patients have a physiological need or engage in blood drinking behavior. Linking rare disease sufferers to terrifying legends carries inherent risks of discrimination and stigma. Modern medicine views this more as a fascinating, but cautiously treated, possibility of cultural misinterpretation rather than a definitive origin. What about the wolfman's feral howl and moonlit transformation? Medicine's gaze turns to the realms of neurology and psychiatry. Imagine rounding with a neurologist. In a hospital room, a previously mild-mannered middle-aged man is restrained to his bed. His eyes are wild, saliva froths at his mouth, guttural, beast-like growls escape his throat, and he exhibits extreme fear of water and air currents. Diagnosis: late-stage rabies. The doctor explains quietly, this lethal virus attacks the central nervous system, causing symptoms including extreme agitation, hydrophobia, and aerophobia due to throat spasms preventing swallowing, hallucinations, aggressive behavior, and abnormal vocalizations like howling. In the Middle Ages, witnessing someone progress from a bite to behaving like a beast and dying in agony within days, wasn't this the very process of a man turning wolf? More than rabies, other conditions could be mistaken for transformation or beastliness. Hypertrichosis, often called werewolf syndrome. Congenital or acquired factors cause abnormal, excessive hair growth over the entire body or localized areas. Historical hairy people like the 16th century Gonzalez family were often exhibited as freaks or accused of being werewolves. Severe mental illness. Acute episodes of schizophrenia can involve persecutory delusions, identity disturbance, believing oneself transformed into an animal, disorganized behavior, and aggression. Dissociative identity disorder did formerly multiple personality disorder might manifest animal alters. Without psychiatric knowledge, these symptoms were easily interpreted as demonic possession or a transformation curse. Certain epileptic seizures, particularly complex partial seizures, can cause confusion, automatisms, unconscious actions, agitation, or even violence, with no memory afterward. Occurring under a full moon, witnesses might make terrifying connections. Drug toxin effects, ergotism from contaminated rye bread, causing hallucinations, convulsions, gangrene, or abuse of certain hallucinogens. Academia still debates fiercely the lunar effect, full moon madness. Does the full moon actually trigger transformations or madness? Numerous studies seeking links between lunar phases and human behavior, crime rates, psychiatric admissions, ER visits, or physiology seizures have mostly shown no statistical significance or extremely weak correlations. The perceived lunar effect is more likely due to cognitive bias. People more readily remember and report unusual events happening during a full moon. The limits of medical explanation. Even if some symptoms, photosensitivity, hypertrichosis, psychotic rage, find medical explanations, the core supernatural elements of legends, physical metamorphosis, immortality, clearly transcend biology. Medical explanations can only suggest that aspects of the legends might stem from real diseases. They cannot prove the legends true. You close the medical chart. The library lights seem suddenly harsh. Suffering once blamed on demons or curses is now filed under cold medical terms: genetic mutation, viral infection, neurotransmitter imbalance. The scalpel of science has precisely dissected part of the legend's skin, revealing the complex pathological tissue beneath. Yet, gazing out at the deepening night, a deeper perplexity might linger. Even if all symptoms can be medically explained, why are humans so compelled to link this suffering to darkness, beasts, immortality, and curses? Why is the answer it's a disease insufficient, driving us to weave such elaborate, terrifying supernatural narratives? Medicine explains some phenomena, but it cannot fully dispel the essence of fear or the power of imagination. The primal pulse of darkness, the eternal anxiety over boundaries, human beast, life-death things undetectable by gene sequencers or brain scans still growl within the human collective unconscious. When you feel an inexplicable chill late at night, or hear an ambiguous noise outside your window, doesn't that ancient, primal question still surface? Just beneath the surface of reason, the light of science illuminates the laboratory, but not every corner of the human heart. And in those incompletely lit crevices, new legends are stirring, taking shape in more modern, more urban ways. You close the heavy medical atlas. The antiseptic smell of the library seems to banish the mustiness of ancient castles. But as you step into the subway station, a damp tunnel wind hits you, and the sickly yellow lights cast distorted shadows on the tiled walls. A new kind of chill, belonging to the concrete jungle, creeps up your spine. Count Dracula may have achieved immortality under Hollywood's spotlight, but in the neon shadows of reality, sightings of creatures of the night haven't vanished. They've merely donned more modern skins. Welcome to the hunting ground of urban legends, where fear and imagination chase each other through the maze of steel and concrete, weaving tales of the information age's nocturnal beings. Imagine yourself on a cold, damp spring night in 1970, lingering on the edge of Highgate Cemetery in North London. This vast Victorian necropolis is long abandoned, its Gothic tombs like the skeletons of giants under the moonlight, ivy-like dark green veins snaking over headstones. The air smells of damp earth and rotting wood. Suddenly, your hair stands on end. A tall, gaunt figure, cloaked in black, glides silently between two graves. His face is indistinct in the shadows, but those eyes seem to glow with an inhuman red light. Terrified out of your wits, you scramble away from the cemetery. The next day, trembling, you report the Highgate vampire to the local newspaper, the Hampstead and Highgate Express. Cold knowledge media frenzy, your sighting wasn't alone. From the late 1960s to early 1970s, rumors of a Highgate Cemetery vampire intensified. Newspapers ran endless stories, radio shows debated it, and it even attracted real-life vampire hunters. The most famous were two experts, David Farrant, self-proclaimed president of the British Psychic and Occult Society, and Sean Manchester, self-styled as the primary pursuer of the Highgate vampire. Both claimed to have battled the evil entity or vampire in the cemetery using methods like sprinkling holy water, chanting spells, brandishing crosses, even organizing nighttime exorcisms that drew crowds of onlookers and media, turning the graveyard into a real-life Gothic carnival. Mainstream sociology focus, the Highgate incident is a classic case study of mass panic and media amplification. Environmental catalyst, the cemetery's inherent spookiness. Perfect Gothic stage, real activity by vagrants or trespassers misinterpreted, and possible animals like owls' reflective eyes provided the initial seed. Cultural fertile ground, occurring during a Gothic revival and the peak popularity of horror films, especially Hammer's Dracula series, the public was highly sensitized to vampire imagery. Media magnification, sensationalist reporting. Vampire stalks London attracted more attention and witnesses, creating a snowball effect. Individual hero narrative, figures like Farrant and Manchester emerged, providing dramatic antagonists to the entity, fulfilling the public's desire for an exorcism story, further fueling the fire. The outcome: no vampire was destroyed. The cemetery saw increased security due to vandalism and disturbances. The uproar faded, leaving only another chapter in urban legend. Shift your gaze to the sun-baked American South. Imagine wandering the maze-like alleys of New Orleans' French Quarter. The air is thick with coffee, powdered sugar from beignets, and the muddy scent of the Mississippi River. A local old-timer pulls you aside, pointing mysteriously to an ancient building with peeling green paint and wrought iron balconies. Know about the voodoo vampire, the Comte Saint-Germain, not that 18th-century mystic. This count, they say, lived round here in the early 1900s, kept himself alive with voodoo magic, came out at night to suck the life force from the living. Hybrid legend, New Orleans vampire lore is unique, a bizarre blend of African voodoo, Catholic saint veneration, French colonial history, and modern Gothic subculture. Voodoo elements, emphasis on using charms, gris-gris, dolls, and rituals to control or defend against the undead, rather than traditional crosses and holy water. The Saint-Germain mystery, the name was appropriated and attached to a vague local legend of a wealthy, eccentric aristocrat, its true origins murky. Real-world anchoring, places like the Lalaurie mansion, site of a notorious slave torture scandal, and the tomb of voodoo queen Marie Laveau in St. Louis Cemetery No. 1 are woven into the vampire map, becoming Gothic tourist hotspots. Academic puzzle, are these highly localized, multicultural vampire legends formed organically from the bottom up, or are they a product of cultural commodification driven intentionally or not by tourism? Do they serve community identity or tourist curiosity? The werewolf legend, 2, found new hosts in the New World. Imagine driving along a remote rural road in 1990s Puerto Rico. Your headlights cut through the thick tropical darkness, the radio crackles, suddenly broadcasting a fragmented report. Another livestock attack. Throat torn out. Blood drained. Witnesses report seeing a creature like a dog but reptilian. They call it El Chupacabra, the goatsucker. Monster making 101. The Chupacabra is arguably the fastest rising monster born of the information age. 1995 outbreak. First widespread reports in Puerto Rico of livestock, especially goats, mysteriously attacked, found with distinctive wounds, small neck punctures, completely drained of blood. Evolving image. Early descriptions were of a bipedal, spiny-backed, red-eyed alien-like creature. Later it rationalized into a more plausible hairless dog or coyote-like reptilian form, likely influenced by movies like Alien or photos of animals with mange. Viral spread. Thanks to television, especially Spanish-language media, early internet, and supermarket tabloids, the chupacabra rapidly spread from Puerto Rico throughout Latin America and the southern U.S., becoming a household name, a new werewolf or vampire substitute. Scientific explanation. The vast majority of cases were proven to be attacks by common predators, wild dogs, coyotes, cougars, or individuals afflicted by parasites like mange mites causing hair loss and an alien appearance. The blood-sucking was often just the result of predators targeting neck vessels. Mainstream communications observation. The chupacabra is the perfect product of the globalization media-saturated era's monster-making assembly line. Fear demand. Anxiety about the unknown, especially during socio-economic upheaval, needs a concrete outlet. Media engine. Eyeball-seeking media amplifies, standardizes, and disseminates the image. Cultural adaptation. The image automatically adjusts to fit the cultural background of new regions, Latin American folklore, American sci-fi culture. Science's disenchantment. Scientific explanations are often delayed and lack narrative power, struggling against the dramatic allure of the monster story. You sit in a New Orleans cafe, overhearing tourists excitedly plan their vampire tour. You scroll online watching blurry chupacabra videos, comment sections ablaze with arguments. You recall the circus-like exorcism at Highgate. These modern nocturnal being sightings have long transcended medieval plague fears or Eastern European folktales. They reflect something deeper, anxiety of the uncontrollable. In the modern metropolis, seemingly mastered by technology and rules, we still fear inexplicable others lurking at the edges of order. Information age. Collective storytelling. The internet allows legends to mutate, fuse, and spread globally at unprecedented speed. Everyone can be a participant and node in the story. Identity and belonging game. Claiming a sighting or belief can be a rite of passage into a subculture, goth, occult enthusiasts, or a way to rebel against the mainstream rational world. The roar of an incoming train pulls you back. The platform bustles. Faces lit by the blue glow of phone screens move forward with detached expressions. A sudden thought strikes you. In this age of ubiquitous surveillance and inescapable digital footprints, the true creatures of the night have likely evolved. They need no fangs or claws. Their immortality and hunting might lie hidden in the flickering code and digital abyss of data streams. And the urban legends about them are probably still loading. The rumble of the subway still echoes in your ears as you scroll through your phone. Your fingers glide past images of meticulously crafted gothic makeup, elaborate dark gowns, and blurry photos of werewolf rituals under moonlit trees. Dracula and the Wolfman long ago escaped the confines of horror films, morphing into t-shirt prints, bar themes, even totems for a certain lifestyle. They are no longer mere nightmares but circulating dark currency within pop culture, carrying far more complex human ciphers than simple bloodlust or transformation. Why have these images born of fear thrived across centuries, remaining so vibrant even in this era of neon and viral traffic? Imagine stepping into a basement bar thick with incense and industrial electronica. Tonight is Nobles of the Night themed. Purple and crimson spotlights sweep the crowd. The air is a cocktail of leather, dry ice, and the scent of cheap prop blood. You see, a young man, pale foundation accentuated by thick black eyeliner, deliberately mimics Dracula's high collar, perhaps a Dobeo knockoff, his eyes striving for Bela Lugosi's detached allure. In a corner, a group clad in worn leather jackets and fang necklaces huddle, murmuring about lunar phases and the call of the wild, leather wrist straps symbolizing restraint encircling their wrists. On the bar rests a cocktail named the Embrace, its deep red liquid swirling in dry ice fog. Cold knowledge with a twist. Fancy a vampire-themed wedding? Yes, it's a thing. From goth couples exchanging black rings in castle ruins to Twilight fans recreating Bella and Edward's nuptials, sends Wolf Crasher, hopefully, pushing the forbidden romance of undying love to the extreme. There are even specialized wedding planners offering Count Dracula officiant services. When death becomes the backdrop for love, immortality becomes the ultimate vow. Mainstream semiotics time. Why do vampires and werewolves remain evergreen cultural symbols? Because they tap into fundamental, eternal human yearnings and anxieties. The allure and curse of immortality. Immortality, allure, the ultimate fantasy, escaping aging, disease, death. Dracula possesses endless time to amass wealth, knowledge, and lovers. Lewis in Anne Rice's interview with the vampire offers profound, painful soliloquies on this curse. Eternal life's endgame is often depicted as profound ennui or nihilism. Witnessing loved ones die and eras pass turns the immortal into a prisoner of history. Dracula's millennia-long quest for his reincarnated love in Bram Stoker's Dracula. The loneliness of immortality is a sweet poison. The ultimate expression of forbidden desire. Forbidden desire, sexual metaphor. The vampire's embrace is frequently interpreted as a stand-in for sex. Sharp fangs piercing skin, exchange of bodily fluid, blood, inducing intense pleasure and a complete identity shift, human to non-human. This fatal attraction blends danger and seduction. Finkelstedt an interview or Adam and Eve in Only Lovers Left Alive. Power imbalance. The absolute power differential between predator and prey inherently carries strong sadomasochistic S&M dynamics. Tension. Resonance of alienation and marginality. Alienation and marginality. The vampire is the eternal other. They walk the fringes of human society, observing but never truly integrating. This profound alienation deeply resonates with those who feel like outsiders. LGBTQ and communities, subculture enthusiasts, social marginals. The vampire coven becomes a symbolic alternative family or source of belonging. The werewolf's dual identity and loss of control perfectly mirror the modern psyche's dilemma. The Normal Person in a Suit by day. Larry Talbot, who risks unleashing repressed, socially unacceptable beastly instincts, rage, lust, violence by night or under pressure. This transformation is an extreme metaphor for a schizophrenic existence. The eternal struggle between wildness and restraint. Wildness versus restraint. The core of the werewolf myth is loss of control. The full moon transformation symbolizes the utter collapse of reason before animal nature. This touches humanity's deep-seated fear of its own animalistic core and violent impulses. Impulses civilized by society but always threatening to erupt. Simultaneously, it represents a clandestine yearning for wildness. Within the concrete cage, that primal, unrestrained power, even if destructive, holds a fatal attraction. Larry Talbot's agonizing struggle in The Wolf Man embodies the never-ending war between the civilized self and the inner beast. Academia still debates, has pop culture's excessive romanticization of vampires, werewolves, especially in YA franchises like Twilight and The Vampire Diaries, completely neuter these figures of their original terror and philosophical depth. When vampires become sparkling vegetarian heartthrobs and werewolves loyal fuzzy sidekicks, is their function as vessels for profound reflection on death, desire, alienation, and violence severely diminished, reducing them to cheap backdrops for love. Stories. Cold knowledge, symbolic variations. Vampires and werewolves aren't isolated, they constantly spawn cousins through cultural mashups. Zombie, the vampire's poor cousin. Also undead, but stripped of intellect, elegance, and individuality, reduced to pure, indiscriminate consumption machines. Often interpreted as metaphors for consumerism, mass conformity, or pandemic panic. The Walking Dead. Mutant, Wolverine. Logan from the X-Men is essentially the technological age's werewolf, possessing superhuman healing, bestial senses, bone claws, and a berserker rage. His core struggle remains controlling the internal beast. You put down your phone. The bar's pounding music seems to thump against your ribs. That young man in the cheap cape might be a quiet programmer in real life. Those discussing wildness might be the most conventional office workers by day. They don't truly crave blood or transformation. They are playing with and consuming the emotions and concepts these symbols carry: the fantasy of eternity, the testing of taboos, the identification with the outsider, the yearning for release. The vampire's goblet of red wine swirls with our anxiety over time's passage. The werewolf's howl echoes our resentment at the imprisonment of our own wildness. They are mirrors, reflecting desires and fears we dare not face directly. They are vessels, holding the dark currents we must suppress in the light of day. When the lights come up and the party ends, people remove their makeup and return to their respective cages of normalcy. But these symbols have long seeped into the cultural bloodstream. They remind us that even in the most rational of ages, the depths of the human psyche still reserve a place for the shadows under the moon and the whispers of eternal life. These symbols will not die, they will only continue to transform and be reborn, pulsing with the rhythm of the times. And among those who truly embrace the shadows, the symbols cease to be mere costumes. They become articles of faith, a way of life. They are no longer phantoms on the silver screen, but living nocturnals walking among us. Their very existence is the most peculiar reply to the legends. The bar lights go dark, the crowd disperses, the creatures of the night shed their makeup and blend into the city's dawn. But in deeper currents, there exists a group for whom the symbols of the night are not costumes, but lifeblood etched into their veins. They are not monsters from legend, but real-world children of the night, subcultural groups who embrace a vampiric or lycanthropic identity in spiritual or ritualistic ways. Let us gently push open an ajar door, adorned with bats and thorns, and peek into this hidden world. Imagine yourself invited to a nocturnal gathering in an abandoned church on the city's fringe. The air is thick with the heavy scent of myrrh and patchouli. Candle light flickers behind shards of stained glass, casting eerie shadows. No fangs or claws are visible, but the atmosphere is solemn and focused. Participants wear dark clothing, some wear symbolic talismans around their necks, perhaps a bleeding rose pendant or an abstract wolf head emblem. They converse in low tones, sharing resonances with the night, the occult, Gothic aesthetics, or specific philosophies like existentialism or Schopenhauer's pessimism. Cold knowledge, the wellness vampire, don't laugh. A small number practice modern vampirism, real vampirism, but they don't bite necks. Two main branches exist: psychic energy vampires, claim a need to absorb others' life energy, pranic energy to maintain physical and mental equilibrium. Methods include meditation, guided visualization, or close proximity energy exchange with a willing, informed partner. Sanguinarians believe they require the micro-ingestion of human blood, usually drawn safely, hygienically, and with full consent from a willing donor, akin to a microphlebotomy to alleviate an indescribable sense of deficiency or physical discomfort, often described as chronic fatigue, pain. Crucially, they emphasize consent, safety, discretion, and ethics, vehemently distancing themselves from criminality or fantasy. Mainstream medicine remains skeptical, viewing it more likely as stemming from psychological needs or somatic symptom disorder. Mainstream subculture observation: these groups often overlap or intersect with the broader goth subculture. Originating from post-punk music, goth's core aesthetic embraces darkness, romance, historical Victorian Edwardian elements, and the aesthetic exploration of death themes. Vampire werewolf imagery serves as a significant source of inspiration and spiritual totem. Shift your gaze to the forest's edge. Imagine a full moon night, following a group who call themselves therianthropes to a woodland clearing outside the city. No physical fur-covered transformation occurs, but the atmosphere is palpably different. They shed their daily human skin. Some wear symbolic ears or tail ornaments, or paint totems on their faces. Gathered around a bonfire, they share a deep-seated, intense spiritual identification with a specific animal spirit, most commonly wolf, but also panther, eagle, fox, etc. Cold knowledge, the wild heart. The core experience for therianthropes is therianthropy, not role-play. They perceive a fundamental part of their soul or spiritual essence as being intrinsically non-human animal, their theria-type animal spirit. This is not a game or hobby, but a profound identity. Shifting describes a shift in consciousness where one feels their perceptions, thoughts, or emotions align more closely with their identified animal. Mental shift, or less commonly experience brief, phantom sensations of physical change. Phantom shift. Community and ritual. They seek belonging and express their inner wildness through gatherings, online forums, and moonlit howl circles, imitating animal calls like wolf howls to release emotion and strengthen group bonds. Academia still debates identity or metaphor. Is this a powerful poetic metaphor and community practice for the animal within humanity, or should it be classified as a novel form of identity integration disorder or culture-bound syndrome? Psychology lacks consensus. Connection to LGBTQ and many members of therianthrope and modern vampire communities also identify as LGBTQ+. Does this reflect a shared need for expression and acceptance of non-normative identities? Are these identities separate, or is there a deeper link? Boundaries of experience. Are subjective experiences like shifting unique states of consciousness, intense empathetic imagination, or unrecognized neuropsychological phenomena? How can science measure such internal experiences? You sit quietly in a corner of the abandoned church, listening to a woman in a long black dress share how drawing energy brings her peace, as if the night itself were her essential nourishment. At the forest edge under the moon, the bonfire crackles. A long, complexly emotional howl pierces the night air, met by soft responses from others. There is no terrifying metamorphosis, only a deep and strange sense of belonging spreading. Important caveat: these groups are incredibly diverse. The vast majority seek spiritual exploration, aesthetic expression, or community connection, and strongly reject violence or illegality. Equating them simplistically with crime like serial killers identifying as vampires or mental illness is a harmful and inaccurate stereotype. However, extreme individuals can exist within any group. This is not caused by the identity itself. Their very existence offers a peculiar answer to the question, why do vampire and werewolf legends endure? Because even in an age of scientific disenchantment, humans still need symbols. Symbols to express alienation from the mainstream daylight world. Goth vampire, to affirm the untamed wildness within Therian werewolf, to yearn for the transcendent immortality power, or simply to find a tribe who understands the language of the night in an atomized society. They are living proof that legends are not just past terrors, but cultural tools modern people use for self-definition, meaning-making, and community building. The church candles dim, the forest bonfire turns to ash. The participants pack away their symbols, donning their daily masks once more, much like Larry Talbot reverting at moonset. They return to their separate lives, but within them, the territory illuminated by moonlight or shrouded in shadow remains. And while humans seek wildness under the moon or project alienation onto castle imagery, nature has long declared, the true supernaturals walk among us. They need no legends, for their very existence is an evolutionary marvel. Setting the symbols aside, let us turn our gaze to the animal kingdom's genuine nocturnals, observing how they perform survival dramas in the real night, far more astonishing than any fantasy. The embers of the forest bonfire still hold warmth, the human call of the wild subsiding. Now, the true nocturnal stage slowly rises. Switch off the mental projectors showing Gothic castles, set aside the impulse to howl at the moon, and let us dive into the night kingdom of nature. Here, there are no legends, only survival, no curses, only evolution granted, jaw-dropping superpowers. Ready to meet Earth's genuine creatures of the night. Their abilities would make Dracula and the Wolf Man seem mundane. Imagine yourself as a tiny sensor, plunging into the deep, humid night of a Central or South American rainforest. A faint sound of wings cutting air approaches. It's the common vampire bat Desmodus rotundus. It lands silently on the flank of a sleeping water buffalo, light as a falling leaf. Heat-sensing organs similar to infrared imaging pinpoint the warm blood vessels beneath the skin. With razor-sharp incisors, it makes a nearly painless incision. Its saliva contains powerful anesthetics and anticoagulants. Then, like a miniature, elegant surgeon, it uses a specialized groove under its tongue to lap, not suck, the flowing blood. Within minutes, it can drink blood equivalent to half its body weight. Even more astonishingly, its metabolism is incredibly fast, demanding a meal nearly every night. Behold, the real vampire needs no immortality, it just needs an efficient dinner. Cold knowledge, Batman's woes. Picky eater. Common vampire bats do prefer the blood of large livestock, cattle, horses, or wild pigs, rarely attacking humans unless starving or their habitat is severely destroyed. Social safety net, they are among the few bats exhibiting reciprocal altruism. If an individual fails to find food for 2 consecutive nights, a fortunate roost mate will regurgitate blood to share. This isn't a Gothic embrace, but a survival strategy. Rabies vector, they are indeed major natural reservoirs for the rabies virus, a key reason for human fear. Now, point the lens towards a moonlit night in the cold forests of North America or Eurasia. A long, mournful howl pierces the silence, soon answered by others near and far. The grey wolf Canis lupus pax chorus begins. This isn't a horror movie sound effect, but complex, sophisticated social communication, declaring territory, rallying the pack, coordinating hunts, or simply family chat. You follow the pack moving stealthily across the snow, observing their hunt. Mainstream ethology focus. Wolf pack cooperation is an art form, structured team, led by an alpha pair, followed by adult offspring betas and pups omegas, with stable structure and defined roles. Strategy masters, they use terrain for ambushes, drives, relay chases, and can identify prey weaknesses, the old, sick, or weak. Silent communication, beyond howls, body language, ear-tail position, eye contact, and scent marks convey vast amounts of information. The werewolf origin, wolves' high sociality, powerful cooperation, moon howling habits, and historical though rare predation on livestock or humans are undeniably the most direct and potent real-world inspiration for the werewolf legend. Humans projected their fear of wild power and imagination onto these superb social hunters. Cold knowledge, reality check, fear humans. Healthy wild wolf packs are extremely wary of humans. Unprovoked attacks are vanishingly rare except if rabid or driven by extreme starvation. Ecological keystone, as apex predators, wolves control herbivore populations like deer, indirectly protecting vegetation, streams, and even bird diversity. They are vital for ecosystem health. Family first, alpha pairs often mate for life and cooperatively raise their young, exemplifying devoted parenthood. Turn your gaze to the smaller denizens of the dark. Beneath the leaf litter, within rotting wood, countless nocturnal insects enact dramas of life and death. Hercules beetle dynasts. Hercules, under moonlight, this beetle Hercules uses its massive horns, male feature, to battle rivals for mates and territory. The strength of its exoskeleton is astounding. Death is headhawk moth, a Chirontia species, the skull-like marking on its thorax deters birds. A master thief, it infiltrates beehives to steal honey, emitting squeaks to mimic a queen bee and confuse guards. Firefly Lampyridae family, the flickering green lights in summer woods are their precise flash codes for finding mates, a romantic language that can also be a deadly lure. Some females mimic other species' flashes to attract and devour courting males. Academia still debates animal culture. Do variations in hunting techniques or dialects of howls between different wolf packs represent simple behavioral transmission, or rudimentary culture? Definitions and boundaries are unclear. Symbiosis versus parasitism. Is the vampire bat's blood meal purely harmful to its host cattle? Some research suggests minor blood loss might mildly stimulate the host's immune system or help remove old blood cells, a faint echo of bloodletting, but this is far from consensus, and the cost to the host is significant. The relationship remains highly specialized. Parasitism. The edge of super senses, bat echolocation, snake infrared sensing, insect detection of polarized light or magnetic fields. These senses, far exceeding human capabilities, challenge our definition of reality. Scientists are still decoding the neural secrets behind them. You are no longer a sensor, but stand quietly at the forest's edge. Above, real bats arc across the moon's path. In the distance, authentic wolf howls resonate, not human imitations. Underfoot in the humus, beetles dig, and fireflies pulse their cold light. Here, there is no cry of curses, only the symphony of evolution played for eons as life adapts to the night. The vampire bat's scalpel is a precision tool of natural selection. The wolf pack's counsel is an optimal strategy for survival. The moth's death's head is a masterpiece of deception. Their superpowers exist not for terror, but for survival and procreation. In contrast, humanity's legendary creatures of the night seem like distorted reflections and romanticized fears of these natural wonders. Moonlight spills like water over this vibrant nocturnal realm. The wind carries scents of earth, pine needles, and the distant wolf pack. A deeper sense of awe replaces gothic shivers. The true night is not the domain of death, but another theater of life. Here, every wing beat, every stealthy step, every howl tells a story far older, more resilient, and more real than any legend and epic of survival. And when humans lay down guns and torches, observing this darkness with scientific eyes, the figures once demonized by fear, be it bats, wolves, or moths beating wings in the moonlight, reveal a breathtaking solemn grandeur and wisdom inherent to life itself. This grandeur, perhaps, is another key to understanding our own ancient fears. Moonlight from the forest flows over your shoulders, the lingering echoes of distant wolf howls seeping into the earth. The key nature bestowed upon you grows warm in your hand, a key that unlocks not only the door to biological mysteries, but also the dust-sealed chamber deep within humanity's collective unconscious. The vampire's fangs and the werewolf's claws were never mere props to frighten children. They are poisoned mirrors, reflecting humanity's deepest fears, desires, and confusions about the darkest corners of its own being. Now, it is time to face the reflection in the mirror and dissect the true flesh and blood of these legendary symbols. Imagine yourself wandering through a vast museum constructed from human fear and desire. First exhibit, Death, the Untamable Shadow. Artifact, a medieval peasant's imagined bloated revenant. Meaning, the ultimate fantasy of rebellion against the absolute finality of death. The vampire embodies this fantasy to its extreme. Death is paused. The heart no longer beats, yet it can still think, act, feel, perhaps even more intensely. It is a maddening defiance of the irreversible rule of life's end. Yet, how ironic this victory is. The price of immortality is becoming a fugitive from the sun, dependent on the blood of the living to persist. It reveals humanity's profound ambivalence towards immortality, a fervent desire coupled with an instinctive fear of the dehumanizing alienation it brings. Immortality is not a ticket to paradise, but eternal exile. Cold knowledge, fear economics, vampire legends surge especially during periods of mass death plagues, wars e.g. post-Black Death Europe, turbulent Eastern Europe. The closer and more uncontrollable death looms, the more active the imagination of the undead becomes. It is a morbid placebo born of despair. At least death isn't the end, or is it the act of transforming the abstract fear of death into a tangible enemy that can theoretically be killed with a stake? Second exhibit, blood, the holy grail and forbidden wine. Artifact, Count Dracula's goblet brimming with dark red liquid. Meaning, blood, in all cultures, is the most visceral symbol of life force. The vampire's obsession with blood pushes this to its extreme. Source of power, drinking blood is stealing life essence to sustain existence. Vehicle of corruption, blood exchange. The embrace brings about a fundamental identity shift, human-non-human, akin to a dangerous baptism. Taboo sexual metaphor, sharp objects piercing skin, exchange of bodily fluids, intense pleasure-pain, permanent identity change. It's hard not to see parallels with sexual acts, especially the inherent power imbalance, predator-prey, and the potential for violence intertwined with pleasure. Mainstream semiotics lesson, the symbolic network of blood is immensely complex. Religion, Christ's blood represents salvation, vampire blood signifies damnation and curse. Medicine, blood tests reveal disease, syphilis, AIDS, reinforcing blood's role as a carrier of secrets, contamination. Society, concepts like bloodline, pure blood have been used to justify racism or class oppression. The vampire's contaminating blood is a dark counterpoint to this obsession with purity. Third exhibit, the other, the projection screen of fear. Artifact, Larry Talbot's face contorted in agony under the moonlight. Meaning, the werewolf legend is the process of humanity excising its own unacknowledged bestiality and projecting it outward onto an external, destroyable monster. Anxiety of loss of control, the full moon transformation symbolizes the total collapse of the rational defenses. Civilized society demands we suppress aggression, sexual urges, violent instincts. Freud's ID. The werewolf is the raging incarnation of these repressed forces. The brand of non-human. Historically, werewolf accusations often fell on marginalized groups: lepers, the mentally ill, social outcasts like Pierre with hypertrichosis. Demonizing them as beasts provided a justification for social exclusion and violence. Academia still debates fiercely the vampire's nobility. Why are legendary vampires often depicted as nobility counts, countesses? Does this reflect a subconscious recognition by the lower classes of the ruling elite's blood-sucking exploitation? Were the cruel reigns of nobles like Vlad III, Bathory supernaturalized by the popular imagination, or do traits like immortality, elegance, and power simply align more naturally with the perceived nature of aristocracy? Werewolf versus vampire. Class metaphor. Werewolves are often depicted as more working class, more tormented like Larry Talbot, more enslaved by instinct lunar phases. Vampires are elegant, controlled, calculating. Does this subtly encode societal stereotypes dividing laborers, physical workers, bestial from nobles, intellectuals? Cold-blooded calculation. The female vampire's double stigma. From Lady Bathory to Dracula's vampire brides, they are often portrayed as more lascivious, dangerous, and uncontrollable than their male counterparts. Does this layer patriarchal fear of female sexual autonomy, the femme fatale archetype, onto the demonization of powerful women like the land-owning Bathory? Fourth exhibit, the dissolution of boundaries, the deepest tremor. Artifact, a shattered mirror, one half reflecting a human face, the other a wolf or bat shadow. Meaning, the fundamental terror of vampires and werewolves lies in their blurring, even shattering, the core boundaries upon which humans rely to understand the world, life and death. They are undead, mocking our understanding of life's end. Human and beast, the werewolf obliterates this supposedly sacred and uncrossable divide. Self and other, the vampire's embrace forcibly injects the other, the monstrous, into the self-human identity. The werewolf's transformation is the eruption of the other within the self. Natural and supernatural, their very existence negates the rational world's definition of reality. This dissolution of boundaries triggers the deepest tremor within the human cognitive structure. We rely on categories life-death, human-beast, self-other, natural-supernatural to create order and security. Vampires and werewolves are the living or half-living monsters of chaos crashing into the ordered garden. You stand at the museum's center, the surrounding exhibits seeming to whisper. Dracula's cloak is no longer just Gothic fashion, it is a shroud woven from the shadow of death and the lure of the undying. The werewolf's howl is no longer just a horror sound effect, it is the imprisoned wildness within the human heart slamming against the cage of civilization. Every legend of dripping fangs, every nightmare of moonlit transformation, is the distorted yet hauntingly familiar face humanity sees when it gazes into the abyss its own face. These symbols remain undying precisely because they are rooted in humanity's most primordial soil, the fear of oblivion, the greed for life, the rejection of the other, the anxiety of losing control, the ultimate panic at vanishing boundaries. When science explained the plague, medicine named diseases, and zoologists documented bats and wolves, these symbols did not vanish. They merely shed their specific garments of terror, revealing beneath them the eternal skeleton of existential dilemmas. The museum lights begin to dim. The key in your hand seems to dissolve, seeping into your palm. You realize you, too, are part of this labyrinth of symbols. That stirring towards the night, that yearning under moonlight, that fleeting desire for immortality, or the occasional awareness of the inner beast. These are the faint echoes within your own veins, responding to the ancient codes. When understanding reaches this depth, the final, most essential question becomes unavoidable: why, knowing they are fiction, do we still allow, even crave, these symbols of fear to flow through the bloodstream of civilization for generations? The answer, perhaps, lies within the uncontrollable acceleration of your own heartbeat the next time you gaze into the abyss. The museum's gloom closes behind you, the residual warmth of the key of understanding seeping into your palm, transforming into a subtle tremor in your heart. You stand in the bright center of the modern world, phone screens flicker, satellites gaze down, genetic maps are decoded. The light of science seems to have illuminated every corner. Yet, alone late at night, when the wind moans outside your window, or moonlight streams across your pillow, the ancient question still winds its way around you like a vine: why, knowing vampires are fiction and werewolf transformations fantasy, does our heart still race for these stories? Why, in an age of supreme rationality, do rumors and urban legends of creatures of the night still sprout like moss in the cracks of information? The answer, perhaps, lies in your own slowed breath. Right now, in the primal depths of your brain not yet fully tamed by civilization. Foundation Stone 1. Fear is our oldest neighbor. Imagine yourself transported 100,000 years to the grasslands of East Africa. Night falls. Beyond the flickering circle of firelight lies absolute unknown. A rustle in the grass could be wind or a lurking saber-tooth, a distant howl might be kin or a predator. In this environment, hypervigilance saved lives. Better safe than sorry. Mentally filling ambiguous threats with concrete, understandable monster shapes like night-stalking cannibals was more efficient for survival than rationally analyzing every sound. Even 10 false alarms were worth it if one was right. This survival-honed hypersensitive threat detection system is etched into our neural circuitry. The dark hallway of a modern apartment, an empty subway station at midnight, the shadow of an abandoned building. These scenes inadvertently pluck that ancient chord of fear. Vampire and werewolf stories provide a ready-made, dramatic container for this nameless, primal dread. Cold knowledge, the safe room paradox. Ironically, we love consuming horror stories in the safest environments: warm beds, comfortable homes. It's like a carefully controlled fear bungee jump, experiencing the thrill of the fall while knowing the safety rope is secure. This thrill at a safe distance offers a strange pleasure and release of tension. Foundation Stone 2, fantasy is the soul's vent. Civilized society is a magnificent, intricate cage. Rules, responsibilities, the grind of routine life bind us like invisible ropes. The vampire's temptation of immortality is the ultimate fantasy of escaping time's shackles. The werewolf's wild release under the moon is a secret longing for repressed instincts. These legends allow us a brief psychic jailbreak, touching things utterly forbidden or impossible in reality: eternal youth, unbound power, desires transgressing moral limits. They are not blueprints for action, but psychological sandboxes, adventures for the soul in the realm of imagination. Mainstream psychological insight. Horror legends and monster stories are vital cultural tools for processing existential anxiety, anxiety about death. By embodying the undead and their tragic state, we indirectly and safely explore our own fear and confusion about mortality. Anxiety about meaninglessness. Finding meaning in a vast universe and a fleeting life is daunting. Creatures like vampires, werewolves, possessing clear even if evil purpose and immense power, offer a twisted sense of meaning against the void. Anxiety about loss of control. Experiencing absolute loss of control vicariously through the werewolf, or witnessing control being painfully regained in the story, is a form of indirect psychological mastery. Foundation Stone 3, story is the loom of meaning. Humans are homo narrans, the storytelling animal. We cannot endure pure chaos and randomness. Faced with inexplicable suffering, plague, sudden death, madness, incomprehensible outsiders, the deformed, the eccentric, or uncontrollable natural forces, darkness, beasts, we instinctively weave causal stories. Devils, curses, transformations. These supernatural explanations, in the absence of science, provided rough but effective cognitive closure. They made unacceptable chaos seem caused, logical even if with evil logic, restoring a sliver of psychological control. Even though modern science offers more accurate explanations, the emotional impact and symbolic power of those ancient narratives are already woven into the cultural bloodstream. Academia still debates: can scientific explanations truly replace the emotional solace and community cohesion offered by myths? When a medieval peasant who lost a loved one believed them killed by a vampire and participated in an exorcism, did the collective support, sense of purpose, and illusory satisfaction of avenging their kin provide a form of psychological therapy? Is this a primitive counterpart to modern grief counseling and community support networks? Moonlight streams through your window frame, casting sharp lattice shadows on the floor. You lie in bed, your rational mind knows it's just the neighbor's cat prowling by the bins. But on the edge of sleep, as consciousness loosens its grip, that childlike, primal you quietly emerges. It cares nothing for databases or microscopes. It cares only about the eternal, resonating darkness beyond the flickering circle of firelight. It reminds you that before you were Homo sapiens, you were first and foremost the storyteller, shivering yet curious under the starlight. The vampire's pale visage, the werewolf's silhouette against the moon, the blurry footage of El Chupacabra. These are but shadow puppets cast by human imagination onto the eternal dark curtain. The shapes of the puppets change from medieval corpses to Gothic nobles, from forest spirits to urban beasts, but the light source behind the curtain, that pulse towards the unknown, that thirst for explanation, that fantasy of transcendence, and that primal thrill of experiencing fear from safety never extinguishes. We tell stories of monsters, Ultimately, to tell stories about ourselves, about our fears, desires, loneliness, and that eternal blend of fragility and resilience, trembling yet curious, in the face of the vast cosmos and the endless dark. The secret to the night creature's immortality lies not in coffin earth, nor in the moon's silver glow. It dwells deep within every soul that listens to a story in the dark, its heartbeat quickening just a little. As long as humans still hold their breath for the unknown in the darkness, as long as imagination still sparks like starlight, these phantoms of the night will find, within our shared dreams and the starry river of tales, eternal rebirth. Outside the window, the last remnants of the city's clamor sink into silence. The wind has stilled, even the rustling of leaves has faded. The moonlight seems to grow softer, like a thin veil gently laid upon your eyelids. You feel your body growing heavier, sinking into the mattress's tender embrace, as if descending into a warm sea of feathers. Your breath becomes long and steady, each inhalation carries the sun-warmed cleanness of your pillowcase, each exhalation carries away a wisp of the day's dust. Far away, perhaps, comes the faintest, most indistinct cry of a night bird, but it no longer disturbs. Instead, it seems like a distant, monotonous lullaby, guiding your thoughts towards deeper realms of peace. The edges of consciousness begin to blur and swirl, colors bleeding like watercolors. The familiar outlines of your room dissolve in a gentle haze. The fangs, the claws, the silhouettes of castles all dissolve into indistinct patches of light. They rise and fall, undulating gently with the rhythm of your breath, finally dispersing into the boundless, velvet-soft darkness. There is no fear, only a profound and serene stillness, like the quiet before the birth of the universe. You know you are no longer listening to stories. You have become part of the dream. Floating. Sinking. Cradled gently by weightless stardust,